Okay, this meeting session is now being recorded. Like I said earlier, my name is Indira. I'm with the Iowa After School Alliance, and today our 21st Century Best Practice webinar is featuring Monica Post from Camp in a Can. So I will let Monica introduce herself and begin.
Thanks, Indira. Hi, everybody. As Indira said, my name is Monica Post. The company that I am the CEO of is called Camp in a Can, and Camp in a Can is curriculum and materials for after-school programs. It also serves school programs, other sorts of groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, so on and so forth. Anytime there's any kind of science education in an informal sort of atmosphere, Camp in a Can fills that need. We've been around for several years. You probably have seen us at some of the 21st Century Learning Center conferences. You may have participated in a workshop somewhere, possibly. We're kind of new to Iowa. We've been selected, Camp in a Can has been selected as one of the providers for the Scale Up program, which is part of the Governor's STEM initiative this coming year. The STEM initiative, STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, and the Governor's STEM initiative is a fairly new program. It's about 2 years old. It started last year with providing about $4 million for LEAs, which are local education agencies, which include school, after-school programs, boys and girls clubs, museums, libraries, all different sorts of education organizations are considered an LEA within the Scale Up program. And last year, the legislature provided about $4 million for the Scale Up program, and they've done the same again this year. So the Scale Up program is really something that's been very instrumental in helping, we think, and will continue to be instrumental in helping schools in the future improve their science, engineering, technology, and math. I'm going to forward to the next slide. Yeah, okay, good. The reason that this is important, the reason that STEM is important in the state of Iowa is because we are lagging behind the average of the rest of the country when it comes to getting our students into STEM-related careers and going into STEM-related degrees in college. But the rest of the country is also lagging behind. We see this huge gap in the number of kids going into, or people in general, going into STEM careers, and the number of STEM careers that are out there. And it's only going to get worse. And so we want to find a way to improve this gap somehow. And by improving the gap here in Iowa, what we're doing is helping our economy and helping our kids get into jobs that we know are going to be there in the future, because there's going to be more jobs. And we know that that's where the money is going to be. So we're helping our overall economy here in Iowa with the STEM initiative. The way that the STEM initiative works in the state of Iowa, and it's kind of a learning curve for me, but I'm starting to understand this. The legislature has put out, or has allotted about $4 million for the STEM initiative for this coming year, for 2013-2014. There are 6 hubs, or 6 regions in the state of Iowa. And every region, every one of those 6 regions, gets an equal amount of that $4 million. So if you're in Des Moines, in the Des Moines area, your region is going to get the same amount as if you're in the Story City area. So you can kind of see that it helps give an equal amount of money all over the state. And the idea is to get rural programs as well as urban programs involved in the STEM initiative. So after the STEM, with the 6 regional hubs, then those regional hubs look at all these different organizations, all these different groups that are interested in providing some kind of STEM programming to the state. And then those hubs and their board decide who is going to be selected to be a provider of those programs within the state. Last year, 2012-2013, they selected 12 programs to be providers in the state. This 2013-2014, 9 providers have been selected, and CampNACAN is one of those. Our program is called CampNACAN Show and Tell. We've partnered with the Blank Park Zoo. After those providers have been selected, then LEAs, which would be after-school programs, schools, Boys and Girls Club.
Hello, Monica?
Apply for to be a part of the Scale Up program. It's like applying for a grant. If they're awarded the program, then they receive the materials that the program offers. So in the case of CampNACAN, and every one of the providers is different. The curriculum and materials for all of their kids for their programs, and they also get a visit from Blank Park Zoo to their organization, to their place. So if it's their after-school program at school, or if it's at a community center, to with animals.
Monica?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry to pause you, but it seems like we keep cutting out. So I'm not sure if it's just a matter of people muting their speakers and so that happens, or if it's something on your line.
Boy, I don't know. I keep hearing a lot of beeping in and out, so I'm wondering if it's that.
Yeah, I wonder.
Should we continue for a little bit for this next slide and see if we get some stability here?
Yeah, and I see there's a question in the chat box that says, how do we mute our speakers? So if you're trying to mute your speakers on the conference line, it should be a matter of something that's on your telephone. I don't know if your phone has that option or not. I see Vic is also typing something. Oh, he says *6. There we go. So *6 should mute your phone line. So let's just take care of that now so that we don't have all of the beeps that are interrupting the conversation on the conference line. And I see one more person's typing, so let's see, and then we'll let you continue. Okay, so if you're only on a computer, yeah, then you're fine. You don't have to mess with the conference line. If you're only on the computer, just be sure that your microphone isn't on so that we don't hear what's happening on your end. But if you're just listening on the computer, that's fine. Okay, sorry about that, Monica. Go ahead.
Okay. What I want to say is that we've been doing science since the day we were born. As soon as we were born, we have been actually conducting our own science. Every time a baby drops something, there's gravity. They're checking all of that out and learning. Of course, we already know that. They're also studying the psychology of what happens whenever he or she drops something. Somebody will then retrieve it for them most often, or crying, or feeding, all of those. All of that is sometimes science. So we're already kind of, well, we already are scientists. And in a way, we're kind of experts at conducting science because we've been doing it our whole lives. But the question that I want to ask is, why is it that we've become afraid of doing science? And that seems to be kind of a general understanding. If you walk into a room of just general lay people, very often if you ask them, do you like science? Do you like to do science? And of course, it depends on where you go. Very often there are some people that are afraid and cautious and a little nervous about doing any kind of science. So the question is, why is it that we've become afraid of doing science? Well, I suspect part of it has to do with the fear of failing. We all have this fear of failing at something. And I'd like to point out that the successful scientists, the successful inventors, are the ones that fail over and over and over and over again. You've all heard that about Thomas Edison, but so many, many, many failures turned out to be successes, and these were all science failures. For instance, Post-it notes. Maybe you've heard about that, maybe you haven't. Post-it notes, the person that invented Post-it notes was trying to invent a glue that actually stuck really well. Unfortunately, the glue that stuck kept coming off. It didn't stick well at all. And that's how Post-it notes were invented. Plastic. Plastic was invented because the person that invented it was actually trying to find a substitute for shellac. And so he mixed several things, and then when he added temperature, heat, and pressure, then it turned into a solid, and that then evolved eventually into plastic. Super glue was also a mistake. It wasn't supposed to stick to everything. It was a real headache. It kept sticking to the point, and it wasn't coming off. And the person was getting so frustrated. And I think it took several years before they suddenly realized, wait, there's an application for something that sticks that well. Rubber, same thing. I'm sure you've heard of that. When sulfur was added to rubber and then it happened to be dropped on a hot stove, it turned into a stable rubber that we use now. Before it wasn't stable. It would melt and get sticky and break down and so on. And I guess one of my favorites is microwave ovens. They were used for radar and believe in the military, but one of the scientists that was working with microwave ovens had something in his pocket, might have been a chocolate bar or something, and it melted every time he was near the microwave, and he discovered the microwave oven. Eventually, they came up with the application for it. So the point that I'm trying to make is failure is not a bad thing. So we're afraid of leading science, or we're afraid of science. Many of us are afraid of science, but we're also tend to be afraid of leading science. But why is it that we're afraid of leading science? So we haven't quite figured that one out. I mean, we've been scientists forever and ever and ever, but for some reason we get afraid of actually going out there and leading. And I would venture to guess that one of the reasons that many of us are afraid of leading science is because we feel that maybe we're supposed to be an expert at everything we teach. And I would say that that's not true at all. I don't think we have to be an expert at everything we teach. I would also say that many of us might be afraid that we won't be able to answer some of the questions that the students ask. And again, I would say that's not also true. It doesn't matter if we can't answer a question there. In fact, the scientists can't answer all of the questions. That's why they're scientists. Their job is to go out and try to find an answer to their questions. And maybe a third reason that we're afraid of leading science, those of us that are, is that we're afraid that the experiment that we're about to embark on doesn't work. What if the volcano doesn't erupt? What if the numbers don't add up? What if? What if? And I guess my point is that, so what? What if? Everything we've done is a step closer to finding the real answer, to getting there, to turning kids on, to getting things better. There's a phrase right now that my 15-year-old daughter is saying a lot, and I kind of like it. She'll say, epic fail. So if I try to bake brownies and they don't work out, she'll go, epic fail, Mom. Now, that might be looked as a negative thing, but I see it as kind of a positive thing, because she recognizes that maybe it didn't work out. But by calling it an epic fail, she's kind of making it not quite as horrible for me. It could have been really, really bad, but when she calls it an epic fail, we all kind of accept, okay, so it's an epic fail. We'll just move on. So we're afraid of teaching and leading science, and especially teaching and leading hands-on science. How are we going to get over this fear? And I would say that the solution to getting over our fear of teaching and leading science activities is to rethink our approach to science. We need to recognize that when we go out and teach or lead some kind of a science activity, we're doing it jointly with the kids. We are explorers in this. We're not experts. We don't have to be experts. We're doing this jointly with our group. If you think about explorers, Magellan, Columbus, De Leon, those famous explorers didn't know what they were going to find when they found what they found. They were not experts in what they found. They might have been experts in getting places, in navigation and sailing ships, those sorts of things, but they had no idea what they were going to find when they got there. It was all something new to them. And I believe that if we approach teaching and leading science activities with our kids, that takes away the fear from us and kind of gives them a little bit of the power. They can understand what's going on a little better. So I'm going to throw this one out there as well. I think that teaching and leading science activities is sort of like a Monopoly game. If you as a leader went out and said, okay, guys, we're going to play a game of Monopoly. My idea to play Monopoly, I'll go get the board game. I'm going to bring the game out. We're going to set it up. I'll set it up for us. We're all going to sit around the table. And as a group, we're all going to play this game of Monopoly. So everyone there at the table playing Monopoly with you does not expect you to be the winner. Because if they expected you to be the winner of the game, then they wouldn't want to play. And if you lose, it's when you're playing Monopoly, your game for you is an epic fail. The rest of the kids around that table aren't going to look at you as though you're a complete idiot. Not at all. So everybody, there's people that lose and there's people that win at the game of Monopoly. That's how it works. So the point that I'm trying to make is, if you do this jointly, if you're all in it together, even if your volcano doesn't erupt, it's okay. You've learned something from it. You've had a great experience. Everyone's got something out of it. On that paper in front of you, right below the gray box, a few paragraphs down there, you'll see some interesting facts. These are the same ones that I have on the screen. And I'd like you to just take a moment to look over those facts. And, just take a moment to look over the facts, and then we'll come back to it. Well, the very first one, there are animals that can have babies without ever having sex. Well, you don't need to share that with your kids. The point that I wanted to make here is, these are all things that we have discovered just since 1900. In about 1900, we learned that there are animals that can have babies without having sex. Now, I don't mean animals like sponges or animals that use atypical asexual reproduction that you may have learned about in school and may not, doesn't matter. But there are animals that we're somewhat familiar with. We have walking sticks here in Iowa. Walking sticks can have babies without ever having sex. The babies, they can also have sex and have babies. But in this particular case, these walking sticks can actually lay eggs without any contribution from a male. It has a female that lays the eggs. And all of the babies are identical to their mother. So they're all females, they're all identical to their mother. Another one that I think is really interesting, because it was discovered in the 1970s, is the sex of an alligator or crocodile is determined by the egg's incubation temperature. That one blew me away. I have a biology background. I understood it was a contribution of an X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and that's how you get male and female. But no, that's not the case with alligators and crocodiles. It's the temperature of the egg. In 1977, we learned that there are animals that can move in super hot sulfuric acid. Super, super hot. It's amazing. I don't think that before we discovered that, we would have said life can survive in over 700 degrees Fahrenheit. Just in 2000, we discovered these caves that are full of giant crystals. And the most recent one, the one that I get the biggest kick out of, is from 2003. The most recent dinosaur ever found was found here in the United States. It is called a Dracorex hogwartsia. So anybody that's familiar with Harry Potter is going to think that I'm joking. I'm not. That is the real name. That's what they really called it. Obviously, these guys were Harry Potter fans. It looks something like a dragon. I believe that it was an herbivore, only ate a vegetarian, so, might not quite fit that dragon view that we have of it. But what's really cool about this is this dinosaur was discovered by an artist, a veterinarian, and a doctor. And the coolest thing is, they're from Iowa. They're not paleontologists. They're not from somewhere on the other part of the world. No, they're from Iowa, and they were just interested in finding dinosaur bones. Okay, so we're going to move on to this next part, and I'm going to turn on my webcam so that you can watch me here. If this works or doesn't work, because we're going to try out some different experiments. Okay. All right, so you should all have a package of materials in front of you. All kinds of stuff that you got in the mail, or some of you might not have got your registration in quite in time, so we couldn't get it to you in the mail, but hopefully you brought the stuff that you can actually do some of it while we go through some of these different activities. So we've got all the materials we need to do these activities. You should have them all right in front of you. One of the things that we do with Camp in a Can, and one of the fears that we've addressed, is that when it comes to doing hands-on activities, whether they're science or anything for that matter, we have a tendency to kind of veer away from doing too many hands-on things because there's an awful lot of setup materials. Then we have to put together all the materials, and a lot of times that means that we have to sit in front of the television the night before on our own time, cutting out little squares or whatever. And in this case, what we've done is we've tried to make it so that it is all as ready as we possibly can for your kids. And so everything comes in our Camp in a Can kit, but everything's also accessible for you. You can get these things as well. So we're going to start with the couple frog eggs. This one's one of my favorite ones. This is an activity that is in our reptiles and amphibians kit. I should mention we have 3 different types of kits. There's Winging It, which is a bird kit. We have Scales and Tails, which is reptiles and amphibians. And we have Insects, and that's called Insect Adventures. So we have 3 different types of kits. We're going to focus on our Scales and Tails, our reptiles and amphibians activity. These are all activities you can go back and do with your kids whenever you go back to your program. So we're going to start with a couple frog eggs. Now you should have a cup of water and a dropper. You should also have a little Dixie cup, and it's filled partly, just a little bit. You don't need a whole lot with that powder, the Jello, powdered Jello that I sent. It's a fairly simple thing. I'm going to start with how to load the dropper. Now, for you guys, you probably all know how to load a pipette. You squeeze it, put it down underneath the water, and then release enough to fill it with water. Now, the reason I'm giving you this instruction is because a lot of kids have never had to use a pipette or an eyedropper before, and so they don't know how to use it. And so I'm simply just showing you, and I'm making you aware that this is something you may need to show your kids.
Monica?
Yeah.
Did you turn the webcam on? Because I don't see it on my end.
I'm sorry. Here we go.
Okay.
It turned, but it made me agree to 2 things, not just one thing. Okay, so are we okay now?
Yep, I can see you.
Okay, so we've got our water, we've got our pipette. You squeeze it, release it so that you can load your pipette with water. All right, we're going to make frog eggs here. And the way that we do that, we start with our Dixie cup that's got the Jello on the inside. And we have our pipette. And I'm going to hold the pipette fairly high. If I hold it down low, it won't give it time to turn into a really round globe. But I do want it to turn into a round globe, and I want to drop it in about the middle of my Dixie cup. And I only want to drop 1 tiny drop, not a whole bunch. So 1 tiny drop in the middle of my cup. And then, gotta switch hands because I'm not good at this the other way. I'm going to shake my Dixie cup around. I'm sure that's going to make you nauseous there, but kind of side to side, shake it around, and when you look down in your cup, and I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but you should be able to see it, you should have one frog egg down in there. Does everyone see one frog egg down in there? Indira, well, we're just going to assume you do, because I know that you've got your speakers on mute. So I'm going to do it again. Shake it around, and again. Shake it around, and again. And with your kids, you can just keep doing this until you have an entire cup of frog eggs. Now, there's a couple of things that we want to talk about with these frog eggs. First, we want to talk about frogs lay eggs. We've already talked a little bit about how frogs lay eggs, or animals that lay eggs, but in this particular case, we wanted to say, look, frogs lay eggs, and they have to lay eggs in moisture, in water, almost always in water. If it's not water, then they have to make their own moisture. And so the reason that they have to lay eggs in water is because if they didn't, their eggs would dry out. Unlike other eggs, amphibian eggs don't have any kind of shell on the outside of them. So bird eggs have shells, reptiles' eggs have shells, but amphibian eggs don't have shells. Instead, they have this jelly-like coating on the outside that actually swells up as soon as the egg is laid in the water, and it makes this jelly-like coating, and that coating is called mesoglia. It's a form of a colloid, and that's what we're talking about here in the couple frog eggs. First, we're talking about frogs have to lay eggs in water, but then we're also given the opportunity to talk about colloids. A colloid is a solid particle and a liquid particle holding on to each other. And we just created colloids when we did the couple frog eggs. Jello is a colloid. There's a lot of different kinds of colloids out there that we don't sometimes always think about. So, for instance, Jello is a colloid, but so is whipped cream. Any kind of gel out there is a colloid. It's particles of solids and liquids holding on to one another. So I want to give you an opportunity here. You can kind of see that there's some discussion questions at the end. You can extend this activity even more if you choose to. You do this in the spring when there's eggs being laid. Oh, it's great to see those. You can also get egg kits from learning companies where it's a little frog habitat, and then you have to send away to get real frog eggs or toad eggs. Later in the kit, we talk about how toads lay eggs in strings, frogs lay eggs in clumps. But you'll notice that there's additional discussion questions and things. Does anyone have any questions about couple frog eggs?
See, there's one person typing.
Great. All right. The activities are designed, Camp in a Can activities are designed for 1st through 5th grade. We test them on kindergarten through 6th grade. Some of the activities are too complex. Some of the small motor skill things, some of the writing things are too complex for early year kindergartners. At the end of the year, we see some kindergartners that do okay with those. I think that if you have kindergartners, either you need to make sure you have some older kids working with them or near them, or you have some adults that are nearby, more adults than a 1 to 30 ratio, so that they can help out with some of those things. But for the most part, kindergartners do okay with it. End of year kindergartners do much better than early year kindergartners. Now, at the other end of the spectrum is the 6th graders. The activities, I think, are too simple for 6th graders. But they're not getting bored with them, and that's one of the things that we were looking for when we tested it with the 1st through 6th grade. We tested in our after-school programs, or in some after-school programs and camp programs, depending on the time that we're doing our testing. What I want to share is that some of our clients have started using them at the middle, junior high, and high school level. And when I got call for that, I was pretty surprised. It was a client that had been using the Camp in a Can activities at the elementary level for several years. He called and he said, we're going to start using it in our middle schools. I said, really, and explained, you're familiar with them, don't you think that they need to be a little more advanced? Fortunately, the program, and that's the same district that's also using it at the high school level. But in their after-school program, they have pre-service science teachers actually leading their program, and so they're using these materials as a jumping-off point. So the frog eggs part is the jumping-off point, and then the science leaders go on and do more activities based on that. Any other questions? I don't see anybody typing. So why don't we go on to the next activity? You'll notice that I'm going through this handout that you got in your packet, page by page, and I'm just going to do it that way today. So the next one you'll see is called Color Changing Chameleons. You can see we've got the objectives on there. National Science Standards link, that's being updated right now to the next gen link. You've got your materials there and the instructions. This is an interesting activity because we want to talk a little bit about how animals, specifically chameleons, change color. And so what we've done is we begin by asking, does anyone know what a chameleon is? Has anyone ever seen a chameleon? Now, a year ago, not too many people were familiar with chameleons. Now, for some reason, all of a sudden, chameleons seem to be pretty popular. Disney had a chameleon in one of its movies. Now when you look on television commercials, just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there are 2 commercials, at least 2 commercials, that have a chameleon that's a major part of the commercial. They're changing color. One is a car and one is a seat commercial. So kids are going to become more and more, if they weren't already, they're going to become more and more familiar with what a chameleon is. I just found this the other day at an office supply store. Trying to get it in the camera. This is my tape dispenser. I thought it was cute as could be, so I decided, okay. And you should know that up to this point, in our unit, in our Camping Can unit, we've been talking about the basics of reptiles. What makes a reptile, what makes an amphibian an amphibian. What is it about the skin that keeps that? Why is it that amphibian skin needs to be somewhat moist? Why is it that reptiles have scales on their body? Those sorts of things. But then, as we get to progressing through the unit, we get to do some more interesting things. We get to look at some of the more interesting aspects of the reptiles and amphibians, and that's why we're talking about chameleons and how they change color. So what you need right now for this next activity is the piece of styrofoam and the 2 umbrellas that you've got. And I want you to stick the umbrellas in the styrofoam like I've done right here. Fairly simple. Now we're going to pretend that this is a little spot of chameleon skin. And you're going to look at it from straight on, straight above. Now there's a little bit of orange and a little bit of yellow, but mostly white, really, on that chameleon skin. So that chameleon is mostly white in this particular case. But inside the skin, there are special cells called chromatophores. And chromatophores are right there under the skin, and they can open and close and change the chameleon's color. Some chameleons can open and close, or some chameleons have lots of different colors that they can change. And you're never going to see a plaid chameleon. You might see one with kind of a camel sort of changing color. So when you first look at our chameleon, with it like I had showed you before, it's primarily white. I'm going to see if I can, there, something like that. Primarily white. But when the chromatophores open up and stay open, and just so you guys know, you'll have a little tiny pink ring underneath of that umbrella, and that will usually help it stay up. When the chromatophores open up, that changes the color of the chameleon skin. And if there were different colors there, different layers, browns and greens, blues and reds, the chameleon skin could change to whatever is around its environment. And so it helps camouflage it in that special way. So these are how chromatophores work with chameleons. We have not a real, true chameleon here in the United States, but we have a lizard called an anole. You'll find it in areas around Florida, the Carolinas, tropical areas. They can change too, but they're not real dramatic. You'll see a little bit of a green to a brown and kind of muddy colors. So they can blend in a little bit, but certainly not as dramatic as chameleons. Does anyone have any questions about this particular activity or in general, chameleons or reptiles? I don't see anybody asking yet, typing into the chat, but if you do, you're more than welcome to ask at any time. I'm happy to answer whatever I can for you. So you can kind of see that doing science activities can be a lot of fun, and they don't have to be that complex. They're not likely to, I mean, you may have failures, but it always works out somehow because it can get questions going, it can answer questions. There's nothing wrong with not being able to answer questions. And we are so fortunate to be able to look up our answers to questions almost immediately with the internet now. I'm going to go to the next one, which is called Tiny Turtle. And to prepare for tiny turtles, and you wouldn't have to do this, you would just hand your kids the full green sheet of paper that you received. But to prepare for tiny turtles, I ask you to cut out your turtle shape and your round circle, that's the upper scale for the turtle. And we're going to make a tiny turtle here. And the reason I asked you all to do that ahead of time is so that we could be on the same page with this. And you wouldn't have to sit there and watch me actually cutting out these turtle pieces. So you've already got those. You also need this cup that you've got there, this, well, it's called a condiment cup. What I want you to do is turn it up down. I'm going to try to not make you guys nauseous watching me. So I'm going to put it down here where you can't see me doing it, but I'll explain what I'm doing. I want you to put glue all around the outside of the condiment cup. And you can use your white glue or your stick glue. I'm actually using stick glue today. I prefer to use white glue. So I'm putting it all on the outside of the condiment cup and also on the bottom, the upside down part of the bottom. And I'm making a turtle. What we're trying to do right now is show that turtles, the bones inside of a turtle, the ribs, are all connected. And a turtle can't walk away from this shell. So now I'm going to take this round circle, and this is called the carapace. Turtles have two column shells. The top one is called the carapace. And then I've just taken that circle and laid it on top, and now I'm just going to squish it around the outside. I'm not a neat person. And the reason I like the white glue a little better for this than the thick glue is because the white glue tends to catch all of the little pieces that stick out. But now I've already got my carapace on there. And if I want to get really picky and everything, I can stick down the little pieces that are sticking up that didn't get stuck down before. But now, here's my carapace. Notice that there's a line of scales on the carapace right there down the middle. That line of scales would be where the vertebrae go. Now, if you're working with kindergartners, don't worry about it. But if you're working with older kids, this is your opportunity to explain that the vertebrae tend to follow that same line, vertical line of scales right there. And what I'd like you to do now, and that comes in handy knowing that, what I'd like you to do is take your white sheet of paper and cut out your ribs, just the ribs. Leave the eyes on that paper right now. But just cut out the ribs on the dotted line. And then you'll notice that there's also dotted lines that go in between the ribs. Go ahead and cut those out too. And while you do that, I'll do the same. So one of the issues that we get to deal with is that some of our kids have seen a cartoon, and I bet all of us have, where the turtle stands up and walks out of his shell. Two reasons that an issue. First, kids have seen it on a cartoon, so they have a tendency to believe that that's possible. But also, there are animals that adopt shells, like hermit crabs. So many kids are familiar with hermit crabs, and that have adopted shells. They can go into the shell, and they can come out of the shell, but they're not a part of the shell. I'm going to assume that you've got your ribs all cut out. And the reason that I wanted to show you where that vertebrae is on the outside of the carapace, I want to show you the vertebrae that are attached to the ribs there. Now, if you're working with older kids, it's nice to have them line up that line of scale with the vertebrae on the inside. And the way that we do this is we take just a little bit of our glue, put it on the inside of the cuff, and we take our ribs. I try to line them up and really just stick them in. Now, the nice thing is you don't have to do a whole lot of glue on the inside of the cuff. Just at the very, very bottom of that cuff. Look away from the screen if I'm making you nauseous from all of the moving around. Now again, with your kindergartners, just get the ribs on the inside. With the older kids, if you can line them up with the vertebrae on the outside, that's great. Now the ribs are on the inside, the carapace is done on the outside. Now we need to attach the plastron, which is the bottom shell, and the legs and the head and the tail, to our turtle. So the trick with this now, what I want you to do is lay your plastron so that the printed side is laying flat down on the table in front of you. And I want you to lay your cup on top of your plastron. Like this. And then you'll notice that you have a cap right there that sticks out. It's the only square or rectangular piece. Just fold that up, and with the tape that you have, your Scotch tape that you've got there, just tape it to the side of your cup. So yours should look like this at this point. Oh, yeah. Except I've got my head in the wrong place. Sorry, I'm going to let it. I want my head to line up with my vertebrae. I did not mention that. So you'll see I've got now my head lined up with those scales on my vertebrae. Now again, kindergartners, don't worry about it. Get the plastron and the carapace in the right place. Older kids, go a little bit more advanced with them, if you'd like. Okay, so the next thing I'd like you to do is cut your eyes out. Remember, we kept them on the paper, we kept them attached. The reason is because if you cut them out ahead of time, they will get lost. Almost every single time. Now, where I want you to put the eyes after you've cut them out, and I bet I'm ahead of you right now, unless you're a really quick eye. You can cut the eyes out, is on the blank side, so on the top. And I'll give you a couple minutes to get caught up. Every kid enjoys different kinds of activities. You know that they all have different learning styles. Some like making frog eggs. Some like going out and calling birds with a special bird call that they made. Some like doing activities like this that are like art activities. They all vary. And we want to try to find ways to reach all of them and excite all of our kids about science. I think more importantly, what we're doing is not exciting them just now. We want them to remember the excitement that they have at this time. I look really excited. And we want them to, and they see it. Because finally, you should have your turtle there. And what I've done now is I've folded his legs and his head and his tail a little bit, so you can see him. I did a couple of folds with the legs and the feet so that you can see how I did this. Oh, I'm not good at finding the camera. And we have our turtle. And this is our opportunity to show kids that they have ribs that are connected to the inside the turtle, and they can't come out. Does anybody have any questions about turtles? Any questions for us? And this is worth $20 that you paid for it?
Barb, are you asking a question? Okay, maybe it was just background noise.
Activity. By the way, put in your paper, you've got a template there that you can copy on green paper and on white paper for the kids. And I guess I would definitely stress to them, don't cut out the eyes, because you will have kids that basically end up drawing on their eyes almost every time.
Monica, I'm only seeing you. I don't see the item on the screen at all. There we go.
There we go. All right, so I'm going to talents and tongues next, which is the next page. And with talents and tongues, again, we've already been talking about reptiles, their characteristics, amphibians, their characteristics, the things that are different, the things that are the same, and now we want to be talking more specifically. Well, one of the things that we know about snakes is that they have this long tongue and they wave it in the air. I'm going to try to remember to wave it in front of me here. Back up a little bit. The snakes stick out their tongue and they wave it in the air. And often when I ask kids, why are they waving their tongue in the air? Not every time, but often I will hear, well, they're trying to sting me, they're trying to bite me, they're trying to tickle me, or those sorts of things. Many times we also hear that the kids understand what the tongue is for and what it's doing. But I'm going to be a little bit more specific about what it's doing and how it's doing it. So when a tongue sticks his tongue out in the air and waves it around, he's smelling, basically. That tongue is sticky and wet. And there's two ends to it, the fork end. And as it's waving it around, it's waving it and picking up scent particles, which are solid particles in the air. And those scent particles are sticking to the tongue. If the left fork of the tongue has more scent particles on it than on the right fork, that means there's something over there on the left side, the snake's left side, that might be delicious. So if we pretend like there's a mouse over on my left side and I'm waving my tongue around and I have more scent particles on that left fork, I can know that there is a delicious mouse over there to my left side, and that will make the tongue, or the snake, want to go in that direction. So after the snake sticks his, well, first, what we're going to do the scent particle thing. So you have in front of you a sugar packet, and I'm going to have you open your sugar packet this way, across the long side, not across the short side like we normally do. So I'm going to just rip the top off of my sugar packet like this. Now, inside the sugar packet are the scent particles. And my tongue is going to pick up scent particles just like a snake's tongue. So you can all do that right now. Got scent particles on your tongue. You know there's something delicious right there. That helps you understand that. After the snake pulls his tongue back into his mouth, because he doesn't know yet, scent particles are still just on his tongue. In fact, if you did that with the sugar, you wouldn't really know what you were tasting until you got it all the way back in your mouth, because your whole mouth needs to be tasting that. Snake brings his tongue back into his mouth and sticks his tongue, both of those forked ends, up into an organ in the roof of his mouth, which is kind of a hole. It's called the Jacobson's organ. And the Jacobson's organ is what sends the message to his brain, and then his brain says, oh, you're smelling something you've had before, and it was delicious before. It was a mouse. Maybe that's what you want to go eat right now. We have Jacobson's organs also. You and I do. However, our Jacobson's organ has been now covered by the roof of our mouth. We don't depend on it quite as much. And so now it's covered by the roof of our mouth. We can't smell with our Jacobson's organ as well as a snake can, but we do at times smell with our Jacobson's organ. Have you ever walked into a really smelly space and you plugged your nose, it breathed with your mouth, and for some reason it was still kind of like you could still smell it? Well, it was a strong enough smell. That's your Jacobson's organ working. So you have in front of you 2 cotton balls. I want you to pick the one with the brown spot on it. It was in the little baggie. You can take it out of the baggie. The reason it was in the baggie is because you want to keep that scent there. It tends to dissipate. So take it out of the baggie. Don't eat the cotton ball. Don't swallow it. You don't have to touch it to the inside of your mouth because that changes things. But I want you to put it somewhat in your mouth and suck in with your mouth, suck air in with your mouth, and see if you can actually get your Jacobson's organ to smell what's on that cotton ball. You're not tasting it. Those are scent particles. If it's strong enough, it'll go above and go beyond the palate of your mouth, and you'll be able to actually smell the stuff that's on that cotton ball. And just for you guys to know, and the kids will ask, but just so you know, that's liquid smoke. It should smell a little smoky. Or, I'm sorry, well, yes, it should smell a little smoky. Now, if you were touching it to your tongue, that would be taste. The other one, do the same thing. See if you can figure out what that scent is. Again, don't touch it to your tongue. Don't touch it inside of your mouth. And when you're doing this with your kids, throw the cotton balls away afterwards. One kid per cotton ball. And just for you guys to know, that one is a mint or a peppermint. So always there are some people that smell better than other people in a room. Sometimes they're the kids that smell lunch before lunch is made, or smell the smoke, or all those different sorts of things. So some have a better sense of smell than others. Just like people that need to wear glasses don't need to wear glasses. Need to wear hearing aids don't need to wear hearing aids. It works exactly the same way. Different senses. So were you all able to smell with your mouth? I'm asking some of the discussion questions. You can answer these yourself. You don't have to tell me. But were you able to? Are you a good smeller, or are you not such a good smeller? So have you smelled with your mouth before? These are things that you can continue and keep this activity going with kids if you choose to. The last 2 activities in the packet are not ones that we're going to do, but I wanted to include 2 more activities for you so that you could do these as well. The first one is called mimicry, and it's from the insect unit, and it's about how some animals mimic other animals. Now, mimicry can happen with behavior, and mimicry can happen with the way that an animal looks. In this case, the mimicry activity is about how animals look the same but are very different. So I'm going to just kind of briefly walk you through it. In the mimicry activity, you have 2 kinds of chocolate. You have baking chocolate, which has 0 sugar. So when you go to the store and you're looking for chocolate, baking chocolate has no sugar in it. And you need also a semi-sweet chocolate. And I recommend that you get the same brand, the same kind of packaging. It might be slightly different color, and then your bars will look pretty much the same. We break them up into little pieces, and then we offer both of those pieces to our kids. We talk a little bit about these 2 different kinds of butterflies. One is a monarch. You're all familiar with monarchs. And the other is a viceroy. And a viceroy looks almost exactly like a monarch, almost identical, except it's a little bit smaller. The pattern, very similar, but not exactly the same. Viceroys happen to be delicious. Absolutely delicious. I've never had one, but I'm just taking the bird's word for it. Delicious. Monarchs, on the other hand, are not only not delicious, they also are a little bit toxic. So when a bird eats a monarch, they get an upset stomach. It doesn't taste good. You will see them actually sticking their tongue out, kind of like, what did I just do? Well, the same happens whenever we take a bite of that baking chocolate. If a bird takes a bite of a monarch, or if one of your children took a bite of the baking chocolate, then all of a sudden the bird has no interest in trying that other butterfly that looks so much like the monarch. Because there's a chance that it will taste horrible, there's a chance it will make them feel not great. Well, the same thing sort of happens with kids. If you have them take a bite of baking chocolate, and I always tell them to do it very cautiously, otherwise you're going to have kids spitting things out all over your room. But I always tell them to do it very, very cautiously. Take a little bite of baking chocolate, then offer them the other chocolate. Usually they'll be somewhat cautious about that second one, and sometimes they'll even just say, nope, sorry, don't want any other chocolate. That's one of those activities you need to remember. You may have kids that are allergic, so you'll know that. You should know that anyway. The other activity that's in that packet is called Warm Me Up. And the things that you need for Warm Me Up are hand warmers, popsicles that are already frozen, so get those in the freezer, little pieces of foil, aluminum foil. Just little pieces of aluminum foil. I used, about the same size as that styrofoam, about approximately. And then feathers, little bag of down feathers. In our case, we take feathers from a feather pillow, down feathers from a feather pillow, and put them in a little tiny, like a snack-sized Ziploc bag. And that will become your insulating bag. And then we have kids put their hand on the hand warmer, and it needs to be good and warm, so let it warm up for a little bit before you start your activity. And they'll, of course, feel it warm. Then we have them put their hand on the popsicle, and of course it's going to feel cold, very cold. Then we have them put the foil sheet on top of the hand warmer, and their hand on top of the foil sheet on the hand warmer, and they will feel the warmth coming through the foil sheet up to their hand. And then we have them do the exact same thing, only instead of the hand warmer is a popsicle. So popsicle, foil sheet, hand, and then they'll feel the cold coming right through that foil sheet up to their hand. And then the last thing we do is the exact same thing, only instead of the foil sheet, they put the little down bag there. So hand warmer, down bag, their hand on top of it. And what do you suppose is going to happen? They're not going to be able to feel the warmth coming through that down bag nearly as well as it was coming through the foil. And same with the popsicle. They won't be able to feel the cold coming through that down bag as nearly as well as it was coming through the foil. And then this gives us an opportunity to talk about insulation and conducting, insulators and conductors. Foil is a conductor. Metal is a conductor. It allows heat to pass through it very quickly. Down feathers are insulators. They keep things from passing through, heat and cold. And the reason is because down traps air, foil doesn't trap the air very well. So anyway, this gives you kind of an idea of some different activities that you can do with your kids that introduce science, that's fun, that keeps them excited, that uses a variety of different methods to get them involved. And of course, there's so many more. They're online. You can look at Camp in a Can. Camp in a Can's website. We have 25 activities in each of our kits, and you can break them up however you choose. And I'm always here. You're welcome to contact me if you have any questions, and go to the website if you'd like to look at anything. And then in the spring of next year, I encourage you to apply for the Scale Up program if it happens again, which we're hoping that it will. All of the participants, all of the LEAs that did apply for the Scale Up program, they're getting to do these activities. They're getting all these materials for free. And so their kids are doing them. It's probably happening even in your community, so you might want to check around and see if someone in your community got a Scale Up award this year and if they're doing anything like that. So Indira, I'm going to turn it back over to you. If there's anybody that has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks so much, Monica. Is there anybody on the line who has any additional questions that weren't typed in the box yet? Sandy says great activities.
Thanks, Sandy.
Okay, well, up on the screen you have Monica's contact information, and you can contact her via email or by telephone. Any other thoughts or comments before we stop the webinar?
Not for me.